It was always weird to me that the Fast and the Furious never capitalized on the video game market, especially during those early movies. Like, it wasn't a problem, mostly thanks to Need for Speed, but the amount of times I heard people mistake Need for Speed for the Fast and the Furious speaks to just how strong the brand was. But the lack of speedy and angry video games wasn't for the lack of trying. E3 2003 had an open-world Fast and Furious game announced and set to release later that year, the same year as Underground, and then promptly cancelled without reason. Not only could this game have beaten the first Underground to the punch, it could have beaten the second Underground by about a year to the free-roaming open-world punch, but it didn't. Fast forward a few years to September of 2006, and British budget racer specialists Technics quietly released the Fast and the Furious on PS2 and PSP. You might have heard of these guys before because they made Ride to Hell Retribution, a game that we don't talk about, but this Fast and Furious game had me interested because a lot of the talk online about it these days is about how it's extremely underrated and overlooked and how it's the only good Fast and Furious game. Granted, I saw a lot of negativity about the game too, but that only had me wanting to play it myself even more. Even critic reviews at the time were polarized in a similar way. So I jumped in, bought myself an AE86 because, I mean, someone's gotta deliver all that tofu. I did it up a bit and I found out that I completely sucked at this game, like to the point where I'm almost embarrassed about it, and I'm sure that watching this review will be a bit frustrating because of it. For some reason I just couldn't wrap my head around cornering. Whenever a turn or even a light bend started approaching, my brain just sort of conked out and I couldn't figure out proper speed control or drifting. I'd get stuck sliding the wrong way or not entering a drift when I wanted to. It felt really weird, like nothing I'd played before. Part of me was willing to dismiss the mechanics as just being bad, but the loading screens and the game's manual talked about all these different realistic ways of drifting and the different car types affecting that, which had me thinking that there's more thought put into these mechanics than I knew. On top of that, I actually really liked how heavy the racing felt. Like, at top speeds you need to fight to keep your hefty lump of metal straight, which is an unusual feeling. And of course, Reese Millen, defending US drifting champion on MTV.com's The G-Hole, said this is the #1 racing game out there, and who can argue with that? I was also comfortably winning races despite not being able to corner. There's no rubber banding here, so you can just blow people off the track, and I was enchanted by the graphics. Like, this is a great looking PS2 game, especially emulated like this. The tire smoke, the post-processing on the lighting, the fantastic licensed car models, and the nighttime Tokyo vibe is a really good energy. Taking place on the legendary Shuto expressways, to put it generously, there's obvious inspiration from things like Tokyo Extreme Racer, Initial D, and Wangan Midnight. You can even drive up to races, flash your lights at them, and instantly race, just like Tokyo Extreme. But it's not all highway racing, with half the game being Initial D-style toge tracks, so I took my humble sprinter to the mountain passes because who wouldn't, and completely sucked. Like, even more than before. I just couldn't handle the thing as I crashed and spun out over and over and over. I still was winning races and earning too much money because the difficulty was trivial, but just for my own sanity's sake, I needed something with more grip. After perusing the dealers, I eventually settled on a Lancer Evo because of Too Fast, Too Furious. It's all-wheel drive, so hopefully it has more grip and is easier to control. I did it up, wrote a certain word on it because my girlfriend told me to, and utterly hated how it handled. Too heavy, too unresponsive. I then tried a Sylvia that I won and found it a bit better, but just not that much better. And then I decided I'd replace the engine and max out the stats on my AE86 because it's just that cool of a car, but after doing so, I still wasn't happy. I did realize though that tuning and switching cars has a huge effect on handling and performance, more so than most games. Like, not only does each car handle wildly different, each mod noticeably has an effect too, so I continued on my quest to find a car that I could actually drive, all while still beating the really easy races. Japanese cars weren't doing it for me, it seemed, so it was time to go American. My next car was a Corvette, which I styled to perfection. The car customization here is appropriately fantastic. Like, this painting and vinyl stuff alone was top shelf at the time, and on top of that there's hundreds of real-life licensed body kits and wheels and rims and skirts and spoilers to play with, and apparently they actually affect the downforce of the car. On top of that there's window tinting and underglows and even a trinket you can hang behind cars. Namco published this game and they included so much Namco-y stuff to unlock and put on your car, and I'm here for it. If you like the import scene, you'll definitely get a kick out of all of this stuff. So I bought my Corvette, invested a lot into its performance, and painted it to my liking. Ka-chow. Thankfully, it controls much nicer than anything else I'd driven. Like, it was still Struggle Street for me, or Struggle Highway, and I still wasn't convinced that this game's driving model was actually good, but I at least felt like I could turn easy corners now without hitting walls. Turning off the driving assist option helped with that too, which is the opposite of what it should be doing. Thanks to the visuals, and particularly the car customization, I was enjoying closing out my days with this game. It was something to relax to in a sense, and when I did nail a drift every now and then, it felt really good. I realized the game was more like a simulator in a sense, in that it was all about self-control and driving conservatively, which was rewarding in its own way. I liked having to control my speed while cornering, and I liked the tiny moments of improvement. I did have to mute the soundtrack though and play my own music. Like, it's just way too small and mediocre, with mostly pop-punk songs that aren't Fast and Furious at all. Like, the movies actually have really fun soundtracks. It's a shame that this doesn't just reuse them. And on that note, I'd kind of forgotten that this is a Fast and Furious game at this point. Like, I guess it's obviously the Tokyo Drift game, but beyond the tuner scene, that's only really because it's in Tokyo and there's drifting. After breezing through most of the game, it actually started to get challenging. Every event is a 1v1 no matter what. You choose a location, pick someone to race against, and off you go. There's no cutscenes or really any story. It is a budget 2006 PS2 game after all, but at least they gave each character a written bio. One guy learned to drive through video games, which I thought was pretty funny. Another guy had a Soul Calibur 3 themed car, and though he wasn't the best racer, don't challenge him to a game of Tekken or Soul Calibur because he'll spank you apparently. This guy is said to be straight up awful at driving and constantly falling asleep at the wheel, and sure enough, he's really bad at driving. At least I'm not alone. At a certain point, nonchalantly, completely casually, out of nowhere, one of these characters is Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker's character from the movies, just to remind you that this is actually a Fast and Furious game, and unlike almost everyone before him, he's actually challenging. Just as I was starting to get better at the game, it's almost like the game realized this and finally tested me, and I felt useless again. Rather than sitting back and relaxing, I was forced to consciously focus on improving, and after trying over and over, slowly but surely, I eventually toppled the man himself, who is apparently in Tokyo because he's a wanted man in the US. He just coincidentally fled to Tokyo, I guess, where he then happened to meet up with Vin Diesel. In the next race, we can finally answer the age-old question of who'd win between Lightning McQueen and Vin Diesel. Once the righteous victor took his crown, the game then gave me Vin's legendary Dodge Charger, which I found both really cool, but also disappointing because it was too slow. The game didn't give me the Brian O'Connor Skyline, so my next purchase was a blue Skyline. I was scared of all-wheel drive since my Lancer experience, but I just couldn't help myself, and thankfully it was a step closer to a car that I could make sense of. I returned to the mountains and came across an opponent named Dave Brown and got completely stuck. I tried and I just couldn't topple him. He was too quick, but in trying, this is where I felt that I'd really figured out how to drive. I realized I had to change the controls so that I had both NOS and handbrake on the triggers, and so that I could use the right stick for throttle and brake. Because when braking was just a face button, I would accidentally press it at full force, sending me into a drift, and likewise with throttle, I'd always be getting wheel spin without wanting it. After tuning any car, they become way too powerful for their own good, which I love in concept, so even the slightest bit of throttle will just have the wheels spinning on the spot. In most games, when you're in a drift, you gotta floor it and countersteer to straighten back up. In this game, however, if you give it power, you'll either spin out or be propelled too hard in the direction the car is facing. Instead, braking usually straightens you back up, but it slows you down a lot. Often you just need to let go of absolutely everything to remain in a drift, feathering the throttle and brake a bit to keep it going. It doesn't sound that bad, but long story short, in practice, drifting is really hard, and I doubt it's particularly realistic, but I do know that you really need to be in the zone to control it, and you do need to know when it's worth drifting. Against Dave Brown here, it finally clicked for me, and it felt awesome. It also clicked that I'd gone through the exact same progression that the lead character in Tokyo Drift went through, bashing into every wall at first, and then figuring it out over the course of the game or the movie. It put me in this happy state where finally the whole game came together cohesively for me, and I even went back to my Corvette and found that it made way more sense now too. Feeling confident, I went back to my trusty AE86. With my newfound skills, and while I was riding this high, surely I could finally deliver some tofu on time, but disappointingly, I still sucked, and after trying and failing with a bunch of other cars, it was back to the Corvette and Skyline for me. Finally, after all the racing events got challenging, the drift events got challenging too. They were always the most trivial because the AI opponents sucked and you couldn't really screw up scoring points in a drift. Like, if you drifted straight into a wall, you'd still get the points for it, and even if you crashed and happened to slide sideways from that crash, you'd still get points for drifting. It's really a terrible mode, but when my opponents started getting so many points that I couldn't beat them, I had to try and learn to drift properly. And no matter what I did, I just couldn't do it consistently. Like, despite feeling like I'd finally understood the mechanics, and no matter what car I took out, when it made me actively try and drift rather than race, I just couldn't do it. Entering a drift felt so imprecise and unreliable, which is why I'm crashing so much in the footage, and the collision physics are flat out terrible. The final location for this drifting had super tight roads, which would be fun in a better game, but here I was either getting too much grip or spinning out or sliding into walls. I tried manual transmission, I played all the drift tutorials, and I tried different cars, but nothing was helping. Eventually I did beat the game, but it wasn't pretty. I basically had to crash into my opponents to stop them from scoring. I really just wish this drifting mode wasn't in the game at all, because racing on the mountains is the most fun thing to do in this game, but there's only a handful of mountain races in favor of dozens upon dozens of bad drift battles. It's disappointing too that you play Han, DK, and the main character from Tokyo Drift as drift battles rather than races. Feeling defeated, I thought I'd look up some gameplay to see if I was just bad at the game or if the game is bad. Like, maybe there's some drift car or setup I hadn't played with yet. Lo and behold, it's the physics that suck, and it's not me. All the gameplay of these final events in the game has people stopping and starting and hitting walls just like I did, and they're supported by comment sections with people bonding over how awful the drift physics are. And that left me feeling bittersweet. The game went from an okay-ish relaxing experience letting me experiment with new cars and tuning without major consequences to briefly becoming quite fun once I'd found the cars and tuning that I'd like to hyper-focusing on its flaws and becoming a real sour chore because of it. I was really hoping to end this video on a big recommendation. The customization, the visuals, and the moments of joy I experienced had me excited to present this as something of an undiscovered racer, but it's just not quite there yet. The drifting is too loose and the crashing is too dodgy, and I'm just not sure it was all worth it, but man is it close to being something, and at 5 to 10 hours, depending on how much you like to play around with the customization, it's not the worst way to spend a few evenings, provided you can put up with a lot of long loading screens. Had they just got the physics right, every other piece is in place for a fun, stylish, and timeless racer. And with that, we wrap up the Fast and Furious PS2 game. I think what playing this has done has made me want to play the Genki races like Tokyo Extreme Racer and also the Wangan Midnight games. Like, it's made me want to dive more into this sort of subgenre of racing games. So if you have any recommendations for those, please let me know in the comments and I'll check them out. I also want to mention the PSP version of the game more than I did because there is a PSP version of the game and it is basically the same game, just with all the level of detail things scaled down like you'd expect. I also want to mention the region differences. So PAL versions of the game don't have Honda. So if you want to play this game yourself, play the NTSC version because it has Honda. In PAL, they just stripped it out, assumedly for licensing reasons. Also, when I was teasing this game, I got so many people thinking that I was about to review Wheelman, like Vin Diesel's Wheelman, just because of the thumbnail. And I do actually want to review Vin Diesel's Wheelman, so if you've been looking forward to that, I'm probably going to get to it pretty soon. And finally, I just want to thank my patrons. Thank you to all my patrons, thank you to all the patrons coming up on the screen, and especially thanks to my $5 patrons, Adam Beals, Analog Man, Anthony Heisel, BC's Gaming Shelf, Blake Barnett, Boggy Online, Caden the Dingo, Chef, Chris Bushkus, Devon Grandal, Dominic Chikoki, Evil Chicken, Gary Pay, Casey, Kayla, Labcat, Lachlan Jones, Lucas Raysevic, Maximilian Kunzman, May Aris, Mizaki, Melanie G, Minimme gives toilet rolls in exchange for foot photos, Mustache Duct Tape, Mrs. Minimme, Peaceful Kumquat, Plague, Ritalin for Kids, Skied Panthera, Stocks Are Bad, Taylor Shedden, Tia, Test Drive Unlimited 2, The Mighty Megalink, Thomas Damsgaard, Traplaw Ross, Travis, Trevor Corbin, Trixie Emerson, Under 10 Hours, Who Walks with Fergus, Writing on Games, and Zindictive. Thank you all for supporting, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.